Every morning my body betrayed me before the sun came up. Nausea, dizziness, weakness like something inside me was quietly shutting down. I went to doctor after doctor, blood tests, scans, explanations. They all said the same thing: you're fine. Probably stress. Then, at a charity event, a stranger looked at me. Really looked at me and froze. His eyes went straight to my ears. "If you want to live," he whispered, "take those earrings off. Now." I laughed. "My daughter gave them to me," I said. What he said next made my heart stop. Hi everyone, before we go any further, take a second and let me know, where are you listening from today? Drop your city or country in the comments so I know who's here with me. And just so you know, this story includes some fictionalized elements added for educational and storytelling purposes. Any similarity to real people or places is purely coincidental, but the message behind it is very real, and it may matter more than you think. The alarm on my nightstand didn't need to go off. By 5 a.m., I was already awake, a habit I'd kept for 40 years, long before my husband passed, and one I had no intention of breaking now. The June morning light filtered through the bedroom window in soft shades of gold, painting the walls with that quiet warmth that made me feel alive, awake, present. I lay there for a moment listening. The birds outside were just starting their morning chorus cardinals, I thought, from the brightness of their calls. My chest rose and fell with an easy rhythm. No aches, no complaints. Just the simple, uncomplicated feeling of a body that worked the way it was supposed to. I pulled back the quilt, the same lavender one I'd chosen 5 years ago at a thrift store on Main Street, and my feet found the cool, hardwood floor. The house was quiet around me, just the way I liked it. 63 years old, and I'd learned that quiet mornings were a gift. After Richard died, I'd stopped apologizing for the solitude. I'd started celebrating it. The kitchen smelled like possibility by the time I'd finished my routine. I brewed the coffee, a medium roast from the local place that Chelsea's husband Matthew had recommended, and the rich, dark aroma filled the room. I cracked 2 eggs into a nonstick pan, the butter hissing softly as it heated. The toast popped up golden brown, exactly how I liked it. As I sat at the small table by the window, I watched the neighborhood come to life. Joggers passing by with determined faces, a mother pushing a stroller. The mailman already making his rounds, even though it was barely 6 o'clock. I felt good. Not just okay, but genuinely good. My appetite was strong, my energy was steady, my mind was clear. These were the things I'd taken for granted for most of my life, and then Richard's heart attack had taught me differently. After losing him so suddenly, I'd made a quiet vow: I will not waste the time I have left. I will take care of this body. I will stay healthy. I will be there for Chelsea. After breakfast, I moved to the bathroom. The mirror showed me a woman I recognized, someone with laugh lines and silver hair that I'd stopped coloring 3 years ago because I'd decided I'd earned the silver. My skin had a healthy glow from the morning light. My eyes were bright. I placed both hands on the bathroom counter and looked at myself seriously, the way I did most mornings. "You're doing good, Pam," I whispered. "Keep it up. Health is everything." It was a promise I made to myself every single day. I had money sure enough to be comfortable thanks to Richard's life insurance and the house that was nearly paid off. But money couldn't buy what I had right now: a body that obeyed me, a mind that was sharp, a heart that beat steadily in my chest. That was wealth. That was everything. I had no idea, as I brushed my teeth and got ready for the day ahead, that in just 2 days a beautifully wrapped gift would arrive at my door. I had no idea that the people I love most, the ones I trusted completely, were about to change my life in ways I could never have imagined. By the time Sunday rolled around, I'd almost forgotten about those quiet mornings. The house felt different when Chelsea was in it, warmer somehow, filled with the kind of energy that only family can bring. She called me Saturday evening, her voice bright and eager. "Mom, Matthew and I want to take you out for Mother's Day tomorrow, just the 3 of us. Is that okay?" Of course it was okay, more than okay. The restaurant Matthew chose was tucked away on a quiet corner of Fifth Avenue, one of those places with soft lighting and white tablecloths that made you feel special just by walking in. Chelsea wore the pale blue dress I'd given her for Christmas, and when I arrived, she was already waiting by the host stand, her face lighting up the moment she saw me. "Happy Mother's Day," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. Matthew stood and embraced us both, his arm warm around my shoulders. "The most important woman in our lives deserves the best," he said, and I felt something settle in my chest, that deep contentment that comes from knowing you're loved. We ordered, we laughed. Matthew told me about a promotion that was coming through at work, and Chelsea reached over and squeezed my hand when he mentioned it would help them finally start planning for the future. The afternoon light came through the restaurant windows in long, honeyed streaks, and I found myself thinking, this is it. This is what matters. Halfway through dessert, Chelsea and Matthew exchanged a look, the kind of glance that passes between two people who've already agreed on something. Chelsea reached down beside her chair and pulled out a small box wrapped in silver paper. "Mom," Chelsea said, placing it gently in my hands, "Matthew and his mother picked this out together. We want you to have something beautiful, something that reminds you how precious you are to us." My hands trembled slightly as I unwrapped it. Inside the white jewelry box lay a pair of earrings, silver, delicate, perfectly elegant. The design was intricate, slim crescent shapes with tiny, detailed engravings along the edges that caught the light beautifully. They were the kind of earrings that looked expensive, but understated the kind that would look right with anything. The metal was cool against my fingertips when I picked them up. "They're sterling silver," Chelsea said softly. "Eileen, Matthew's mom, said they're from a special designer. She handpicked them for you." Eileen. My daughter-in-law's mother, who had been nothing but warm and welcoming since Chelsea and Matthew got married. She'd remembered my birthday, called me on holidays, treated me like family. The fact that she'd been part of choosing these earrings made them mean even more. "They're absolutely stunning," I whispered. "Try them on," Matthew encouraged. I fumbled with the backs. These earrings had those little screw backs that you had to be careful with and slipped them into my ears. When I looked at my reflection in the polished surface of my water glass, I barely recognized myself. The silver caught the light in a way that made my eyes look brighter, my face look more alive. Chelsea's eyes glistened. "You look beautiful, Mom." Matthew reached over and gently touched one of the earrings. "Perfect," he said. "Just like you." That night, after Matthew dropped me off at home, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror for a long time. I didn't take the earrings off. I wore them to bed, something I'd normally never do, but that night felt special. Those earrings were more than jewelry. They were proof that I was loved, that I mattered, that the people closest to me thought of me as precious. I fell asleep thinking about how lucky I was, how blessed, how grateful I felt for Chelsea, for Matthew, for Eileen, for this life I'd built after losing Richard. Monday morning came too early, or maybe it didn't come at all. I wasn't sure anymore. I'd made it through Sunday night on pure adrenaline and joy, the earrings still in my ears, my skin still glowing from the happiness of feeling loved. But somewhere around 4 a.m., something shifted. My stomach began to twist, and it didn't stop. At first I thought I could wait it out. I lay there in the darkness, telling myself it was probably something I'd eaten. The restaurant had been nice, sure, but sometimes rich food did strange things to a person's body. I was 63 years old. I knew myself. This would pass. It didn't pass. By 5 o'clock, the nausea had graduated from a dull, uncomfortable awareness to something violent and insistent. My stomach clenched like a fist. Every muscle in my abdomen seemed to be contracting at once. I tried to breathe through it the way I'd learned in yoga class years ago, slow, steady, controlled breaths. But my breathing kept catching, becoming shallow and panicked. I stumbled out of bed, my legs unsteady beneath me in a way that frightened me more than the nausea itself. I'd never felt this kind of weakness before, not even when I had the flu 5 years ago. This was different. This was my body not obeying me, my muscles not responding the way they should. I made it to the bathroom and barely closed the door before my body took over completely. I was sick, violently, painfully sick, in a way that felt like my insides were trying to escape. When it finally stopped, I remained on my knees trembling, sweat dripping down the sides of my face. The mirror above the sink showed me a stranger. My face had drained of all color, not pale, but gray, like something had been sucked out of me and never put back. The whites of my eyes had taken on a faint yellow tint. My lips looked bloodless. And worst of all, I could see the fear reflected back at me, stark and undeniable. I tried to stand and felt the room tilt. I sat down hard on the cold tile floor instead, my back against the bathroom wall. The cold was almost shocking against my skin, refreshing for just a moment before the violent shaking started again. My whole body was trembling now, as if my cells themselves were vibrating with some kind of panic. "This isn't real," I whispered to myself. "This isn't happening." But it was happening, and I didn't understand why. For 63 years, I'd been healthy, reliable. I'd prided myself on taking care of my body, on doing all the right things. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink to excess. I exercised regularly. I ate well. I'd weathered Richard's death, and I'd come out stronger on the other side. My body had never betrayed me before. Until now. I looked down at my hands, still trembling as they rested on my knees. The earrings, still beautiful, still elegant, caught the harsh bathroom light. I reached up and touched one gently, almost absently. They were cool against my fevered fingertips. "What's happening to me?" I whispered into the empty bathroom. The bathroom didn't answer. The house remained silent around me, a silence that suddenly felt less like comfort and more like abandonment. I knew I needed to call someone. I knew this wasn't something I could handle alone, even though I'd spent the last 5 years proving to myself that I could handle almost anything alone. But right now, in this moment, I needed help. I needed answers. I needed someone to tell me that this would make sense, eventually that my body would explain itself, that I wasn't dying. I wasn't ready to admit not yet that something had already started dying inside me, slowly, methodically, deliberately. After hours on the cold tile floor, I finally dragged myself to the living room couch. I had no strength left for anything else. The nausea had eased just enough to leave a bone-deep exhaustion that made lifting my head feel impossible. My phone rested on the side table. I stared at it for a long time before reaching out. I had to call someone. I couldn't do this alone. Chelsea answered on the second ring, as she always did. I could hear traffic and muffled voices. She was at work, probably at her desk downtown, thinking about meetings and reports. The moment she heard my voice, her tone changed. "Mom, are you okay?" "You sound wrong. What's happening?" My voice broke. I told her everything. The sudden nausea that morning, violent enough to double me over. The weakness in my arms and legs, unlike anything I'd felt before. The face in the mirror that didn't look like mine. The fear that something deep inside my body had gone wrong. Chelsea didn't panic. That was the first comfort. While I unraveled, she stayed steady and practical. "Okay, Mom, listen," she said. "Nausea and fatigue can be many things. Stress, a virus, digestion, any fever, headache." I said no fever, no headache. Just the awful certainty that my body was betraying me. "When did you last eat a full meal?" "Sunday. At the restaurant." "Rich food can do that," she said gently. "But I want you to see Dr. Harrison. Today, if possible, or tomorrow morning. We need to rule out anything serious." The way she said it calmed me. Rule it out, as if answers were guaranteed. "I don't want to be alone tonight," I admitted, hating how small I sounded. "You won't be," she said without hesitation. "I'll make some calls. I'll get you an appointment, and I'll come by after work if I can. Matthew has a late meeting." Something loosened in my chest. Chelsea would come. She would sit with me like she had after Richard died, bringing tea, saying little staying close. Within an hour, she had arranged everything. Dr. Harrison had an opening early the next morning. A cancellation, she said, like a small gift. She promised to pick me up at 8, take me there, stay with me. "Mom, I know you're scared," she said when she called back, "but you're going to be fine. We'll find out what this is and we'll fix it." Her certainty almost convinced me. I wanted to believe this was simple, explainable, manageable. I lay there breathing slowly, listening to the house settle around me, counting seconds between heartbeats, trusting that sleep might come and hold me together until morning. I focused on her voice in my memory, replaying every calm instruction, clinging to the belief that love and logic could still protect me from whatever waited ahead. It felt safer than facing the truth alone in that quiet moment of trust. I didn't know as I set the phone down and leaned into the cushions that Chelsea's help was being quietly guided by people she trusted. I didn't know Matthew and his mother had already planned what would happen if doctors found nothing. I didn't know the earrings in my ears had been crafted for this exact purpose, designed to slowly, carefully turn a healthy body into a failing one. All I knew was that my daughter loved me. For that afternoon, it was enough. Chelsea drove me to the appointment with the kind of careful attention that made me feel both loved and deeply afraid. She kept glancing over at me at red lights as if worried I might dissolve into something fragile right there in the passenger seat. I'd barely slept the night before. Every time I drifted off, the nausea would creep back in, jerking me awake. By the time we pulled into the parking lot of Dr. Harrison's office building, I looked as bad as I felt. The waiting room was one of those aggressively clean spaces with motivational posters about healthy living and informational brochures fanned out on the side tables. I sank into a chair that probably cost more than it looked like it should, and Chelsea sat beside me, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel her presence like an anchor. "He's good, Mom," she said quietly. "Matthew's had him for years. He'll figure this out." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Around us, other patients sat in their own private hells, a man with a persistent cough, a woman holding her wrist carefully as if it might shatter. We were all just people waiting for someone to tell us what was wrong with us, waiting for science to provide an answer. When the nurse called my name, I stood too quickly and the room tilted slightly. Chelsea steadied me with a hand on my elbow, and we walked back together. Dr. Harrison was waiting in the examination room, a man in his early 50s with the kind of easy confidence that comes from a lifetime of being right. He shook my hand firmly and asked me to sit on the examining table. "So, Mrs. Whitmore, I hear you've been experiencing some nausea," he said, settling onto his rolling stool with the kind of practiced ease that suggested he'd done this 10,000 times before. I told him everything. The violent sickness on Monday morning, the complete lack of appetite, the weakness that made even standing feel like a challenge, the absolute strangeness of it all, how my body had simply stopped obeying me without warning or explanation. He listened, nodding along, occasionally jotting notes on his tablet. When I finished, he began the examination. Blood pressure, temperature. He palpated my abdomen, asking if anything hurt. He looked in my throat, in my ears, checked my reflexes with that little rubber hammer. Everything, as far as he could tell, was normal. "Tell me about your stress levels," he said, perching on his stool again. "Have you had any major life changes recently?" "Not really," I said. "My husband passed away 5 years ago. I've adjusted to that. My daughter is happy. Life is relatively quiet." "Any dietary changes? New medications you've started?" "No, nothing like that." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like to run some blood work, just to rule out any underlying conditions, thyroid issues, anemia, that sort of thing. But honestly, Mrs. Whitmore, based on what you're describing, I'd suspect you might be dealing with stress-related symptoms. Sometimes our bodies react in unexpected ways to accumulated stress, especially as we get older. Hormonal changes can make us more susceptible to these kinds of symptoms." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that I knew my body, that this wasn't stress, that something was fundamentally dangerously wrong. But I didn't. I just nodded and allowed the phlebotomist to take my blood, while Chelsea sat in the corner watching me with worried eyes. 3 days later, Dr. Harrison's office called with the results. Everything was normal. Blood count normal. Thyroid normal. Glucose levels normal. Every single number fell perfectly within the range of what a healthy 63-year-old woman should have. "I'm prescribing you a mild anti-anxiety medication," Dr. Harrison said when we spoke over the phone, "and I'd like you to try to reduce your stress. Perhaps some relaxation techniques, yoga, meditation, that sort of thing. And if the symptoms persist, we can look into other possibilities." But as I hung up the phone, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not reassurance. Instead, I felt utterly, completely alone. The doctors didn't believe me, not because they thought I was lying, but because they couldn't find evidence of anything being wrong. And in a world where medicine is built on evidence, on data, on measurable facts, what does a woman do when her body is screaming that something is wrong, but all the tests say everything is fine? I looked down at the earrings I still wore every day. They caught the afternoon light, beautiful and innocent, and I wondered for the first time if maybe I really was losing my mind. The days blurred together like a nightmare I couldn't wake from, Every morning was identical, waking in darkness, my stomach already twisting, stumbling to the bathroom. The retching, the weakness, the cold tile floor. By the second week, I'd stopped counting days. The mirror showed a stranger. Hollowed cheeks, sunken eyes, skin like parchment. My clothes hung loose. I'd lost 5 pounds in 14 days, and my body felt like it was slowly consuming itself from the inside. Chelsea came every afternoon bringing soup and flowers sitting beside me while I dozed fitfully. But something had shifted. Matthew came with her more often now, and his presence changed everything. "Your mom's at that age, babe," he said one day while he thought I was sleeping. "Bodies break down, it's natural. Maybe she just needs to accept she's getting older." I wanted to protest, but exhaustion had stolen my voice. Chelsea didn't push back as firmly as before. Had doubt crept in? Had Matthew's dismissal infected her belief in me? That evening alone, I stood before the mirror for a long time. The earrings, still beautiful, still elegant, caught the light against my deteriorating face. Could they be related? The thought surfaced like something dark, rising from deep water. I reached up and touched one with trembling fingers. When had I stopped taking them off somewhere in the fog, I'd decided they were lucky that removing them would make things worse. But the idea that Chelsea, that Eileen would deliberately harm me was insane. That was paranoia. That was what happened to people losing their minds. And yet, my body was failing. The doctors couldn't explain why. The earrings never left my ears even as I withered into something barely human. I didn't know that answers were finally coming, that by the end of this day I would meet someone who would see what I could not yet see in myself. I didn't know that a stranger would look at me and recognize the truth hidden in plain sight. All I knew was that I was dying slowly, methodically, and no one believed me. Beverly had practically forced me out of the house. "You need air," she'd said that afternoon, her voice brooking no argument. Beverly was my closest friend. We'd known each other for nearly 30 years, since back when Richard was still alive, and she'd taken it upon herself to drag me out of my self-imposed isolation. So there I was at the community center's annual heart disease fundraiser, leaning against the wall near the refreshment table, like a piece of furniture that had wandered in by accident. My dress hung loose on my frame. I'd had to safety pin the waistband, and I could feel people's eyes sliding past me, taking in the hollowness, the sickness, the wrongness of how I looked. Beverly had disappeared almost immediately, drawn into conversation with someone she knew. I didn't blame her. What was she going to do, stand beside me all night while I slowly evaporated? The afternoon light came through the tall windows in long golden streaks. The room smelled like expensive perfume and the faint sourness of catered food that had been sitting out too long. Around me, healthy people smiled and chatted and drank wine, their bodies functional and reliable in a way mine had stopped being weeks ago. I was lost in my own misery, barely noticing when the man approached. He was in his 60s, well-dressed, with kind eyes, and the kind of bearing that suggested someone who'd spent decades being respected. He stopped directly in front of me, and for a moment I thought he was going to ask if I was all right, one of those perfunctory social courtesies that people offer to those who clearly aren't. Instead, he looked directly at my ears. "Those earrings," he said quietly. "Where did you get them?" The question caught me off guard. "My daughter gave them to me," I said automatically. "For Mother's Day." His expression changed. His eyes narrowed slightly, and I watched something shift behind his gaze. Recognition, maybe, or concern. "Come with me," he said, gesturing toward the quieter hallway beyond the main room. Just for a moment. Some part of me wanted to refuse, but there was something in his voice, an urgency that bypassed my exhaustion that made me stand and follow him. In the hallway, away from the noise and crowd, he turned to face me fully. "I'm Cornelia Sterling," he said. "I've been a jewelry expert for 40 years. I've designed pieces, appraised collections, and yes, I've seen things hidden in jewelry that most people would never notice." My heart had begun to race. "What do you mean?" "Those earrings," he said, and his voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. "I need you to take them off right now, today, immediately." "I don't understand," I whispered back. "They're just earrings. My daughter—" "I know," he said, and there was genuine kindness in his eyes along with something else, something that looked like pity. I know you trust her. But please, I'm asking you as someone who has seen what I've seen. Take them off now. I stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for madness, for some sign that this was the delusion of a sick woman getting sicker. But all I found was sincerity. My hands moved without conscious decision. They rose to my ears, fumbled with the screwbacks, and removed the earrings I'd worn every single day since Mother's Day. The weight of them in my palms suddenly felt significant, dangerous even. "Thank you," Cornelius said softly. "I can't explain more right now, but you did the right thing." And just like that, he was gone back into the fundraiser, disappearing into the crowd as mysteriously as he'd appeared. I stood alone in the hallway, the earrings cold against my skin, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold them. Something had shifted in the universe. Something fundamental had changed, and I had no idea what it meant. Before I reveal what those earrings really were, I need to know you're still with me. Comment 1 if you want to hear the shocking truth about the earrings. Comment 2 if you already guessed who did this. Your comment lets me know you're here. And please note, the story you're about to hear contains some fictional elements created for narrative purposes. If you'd prefer not to continue, you can pause here and find other content that suits you better. But if you're ready for the truth, keep listening. I followed Cornelius out of the fundraiser and into the warm evening air. My mind was racing, my body moving on pure adrenaline. We walked in silence to a small cafe 2 blocks away, the kind of place where nobody paid attention to anyone else, where you could sit in the corner and talk about anything without being overheard. Cornelius ordered 2 coffees without asking what I wanted, and we settled at a table near the back, away from the windows and the street traffic. "Talk to me," I said before he could even sit down. "What do you mean about those earrings? Why did you look like you'd seen a ghost?" He was quiet for a moment, carefully choosing his words. Cornelius Sterling I was learning, didn't rush into explanations. "I've spent 40 years working with jewelry," he began. "I've designed pieces, appraised collections, done restoration work. In that time, I've encountered almost everything: precious metals, rare gems, intricate mechanisms. And yes, occasionally I've come across earrings that weren't what they appeared to be." He paused, letting that sink in. "What do you mean, not what they appeared to be?" I asked. "I mean earrings with hidden compartments. Earrings designed to hold something. Usually it's harmless, a woman wanting to hide a love note or—" He stopped himself. "But sometimes it's more sinister. Those earrings you were wearing had a mechanism along the edge, a tiny screwback that allowed the chamber to open under the right conditions." My hands were shaking. "I don't understand." "The metal itself can serve as a delivery system." Cornelius continued, his voice dropping lower. "Certain metals, when exposed to body heat and moisture, can slowly release what's hidden inside. A capsule containing a substance that dissolves into your skin, into your bloodstream, over time. Days, weeks, slowly enough that the symptoms seem random, unconnected." "You're saying someone poisoned me," I whispered. "I'm saying someone may have placed something harmful in those earrings, yes. The substance I suspect, based on the design and your symptoms, is thallium, a heavy metal that causes exactly what you've been experiencing: nausea, weakness, hair loss, gradual deterioration." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "Who would do this?" I asked, though, even as I said it, possibilities were forming in my mind. Matthew's cold comments, Eileen's involvement in choosing the gift, the way they'd worked together to select something so intimate, so impossible to suspect. "That," Cornelius said carefully, "is the question you need to answer. Someone who had access, someone who knew about jewelry, someone who—" He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. "Someone who had something to gain. I need proof." I said, my voice steadier now. Something had crystallized inside me. "I need to know for certain. I need to test these earrings." "There's a laboratory," Cornelius said. "Independent, discreet. They can analyze the composition, identify any foreign substances. But Mrs. Whitmore—" He leaned forward slightly. "If you're right, if someone did this deliberately, then that someone will know you're looking, and they might not appreciate being exposed." His words should have frightened me. They did in a way. But they also clarified something that had been murky and uncertain for weeks. "Then I'll be careful," I said. "But I have to know. I can't live like this not knowing, not trusting anyone, not understanding why my own body has turned against me." Cornelius nodded slowly. "I'll help you," he said, "and I'll teach you what to look for. But be prepared for the truth to be far worse than the mystery." With Cornelius steering me through the process, I walked into the private laboratory on Saturday morning, the earrings clutched in my trembling hands. The facility was nothing like I'd expected, all glass walls and gleaming equipment, everything sterile and professional. It looked like the kind of place where truth went to be verified. Dr. Penelope Hayes, the lab's lead analyst, met us in the reception area. She was in her early 50s with sharp eyes and the kind of calm competence that came from years of examining evidence. Cornelius knew her from past collaborations, and she wasted no time with pleasantries. "Walk me through what you suspect," she said, settling into a chair across from me. I told her everything. The earrings, the hidden mechanisms Cornelius had pointed out, my escalating symptoms. The nausea, the weakness, the steady deterioration, the timeline, Mother's Day to now. Dr. Hayes examined the earrings under a magnifying glass, then under the microscope. I watched her expression shift as she worked. Her eyes narrowed. She made a small sound, not quite a gasp, but something close. "There is definitely something engineered here," she said quietly. "These aren't commercial earrings. The mechanism along the edge. Someone custom designed this. Someone with knowledge of metallurgy and chemistry." She looked up at me. "The precision is remarkable and deeply sinister." The examination took hours. Dr. Hayes ran the earrings through various tests: spectroscopy, chromatography, microscopic analysis. Cornelius and I sat in the waiting area drinking terrible coffee and not talking much. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Chelsea texting to check on me, asking where I was. I didn't answer. I couldn't, not yet. By late afternoon, Dr. Hayes called us back. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, and her voice had taken on a different tone. Sadness, maybe. Certainty. "These earrings contain thallium sulfate. It's a compound that dissolves slowly when exposed to body heat and moisture. The capsule is designed to release its contents over weeks, not days." The room spun slightly. I'd known intellectually that this was what we'd find, but knowing it intellectually and hearing it confirmed were two entirely different things. "The amount is significant," Dr. Hayes continued. "If you'd continued wearing them for another month, 2 months, I'm honestly surprised you're still functioning as well as you are." "How did I survive?" I whispered. "You took them off," she said. "That single action probably saved your life." She printed out the results pages of technical data that meant nothing to me but everything to the law. Chemical composition, thallium sulfate, concentration levels. Everything documented, verified, impossible to dispute. "Be careful who you tell," Dr. Hayes said as she handed me the folder. "Whoever did this calculated every detail. They knew thallium wouldn't show up on standard blood work. They knew the symptoms would be dismissed as stress or age. They built their plan on the assumption that you wouldn't survive long enough to figure it out." Cornelius drove me home in silence. By the time we pulled into my driveway, I'd made a decision. I couldn't go to the police with suspicions, but with this, with physical evidence, with Dr. Hayes' testimony, with a clear timeline, I could demand answers. I had to know who'd done this. And more than that, I had to know why. I called Chelsea on a Tuesday afternoon, my voice deliberately steady, even as my hands trembled. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop on Madison Avenue, neutral ground, public enough that neither of us would lose control, private enough that we could talk. She was already waiting when I arrived, seated at a corner table with a cappuccino cooling in front of her. Chelsea looked tired. There were shadows under her eyes I hadn't noticed before, and she'd lost weight too. When she saw me, she stood to embrace me, but I held back just slightly. I couldn't help it. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked, settling back into her chair. "You sounded strange on the phone." I took a breath. "The earrings you gave me for Mother's Day. I need to know where they came from. Who chose them? Where did Matthew buy them?" Chelsea's expression shifted. Not guilt, confusion. "The earrings, Mom. What's wrong with them?" "They're beautiful." Matthew and his mother picked them out together. They said it was something special, something you'd treasure. Something special. The words landed like stones. Do you know where they purchased them? I pressed. Who designed them? Do you have any paperwork? A receipt. A certificate of authenticity. Chelsea set her cup down carefully, and I saw something harden in her eyes. Mom, you're not making sense. Matthew wouldn't do anything to hurt you. Why are you talking like this? Like you don't trust him. I'm just asking. No. Her voice cut through mine, sharp and defensive. Matthew told me you'd been acting strange lately. He said maybe the stress was getting to you, that sometimes when women reach a certain age, they start seeing problems that aren't there. And now you're asking me these weird questions like... She trailed off, but the implication hung between us. Like you're paranoid. Chelsea, listen to me. Mom, Matthew loves you. He's always been good to you. And now you're suggesting that the gift he carefully chose for you is somehow... dangerous. She shook her head, disappointed. That's not fair to him. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. Matthew had prepared her. He'd inoculated her against my suspicions by planting seeds of doubt about my own judgment. The earrings may not be safe, I said carefully, my voice quieter now. I need you to find out everything you can about where Matthew and Eileen got them. The jeweler's name, the designer, where they were made. Can you do that for me? Chelsea's eyes filled with tears. Are they dangerous? Should I be worried? Should Matthew? Just find out the information. I said softer now. Please, for me. She nodded, though bewilderment etched every line of her face. Okay, but Mom, are you sure you're okay? Maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist, maybe. As I drove home, I replayed the conversation in my mind. Chelsea hadn't known. She genuinely hadn't known what her husband had done. That should have comforted me. Instead, it made everything worse, because it meant Matthew had deliberately deceived her. He'd involved her in an attempt on my life without her knowledge or consent. And worse, he'd already positioned himself as the reasonable one, the protective son-in-law, while casting me as paranoid and unreliable. He'd turned my own daughter against me before I'd even accused him of anything. What I didn't know as I pulled into my driveway was that Matthew had already received a text from Chelsea asking about the earrings' origin. By evening, he'd be on the phone with his mother, and they would both understand that their carefully constructed plan was beginning to unravel. But more than that, they now knew that Pamela was asking questions, and they would have to act. Over the next week, I became an amateur detective, and Beverly, my closest friend of nearly 30 years, became my most trusted ally in the search for truth. It started with surveillance. On Wednesday evening, I followed Chelsea's car to Matthew and Eileen's house under the pretense of a casual visit. But instead of going inside, I parked a block away and waited. Beverly sat beside me in the passenger seat, her jaw set with determination. "If you're right about this, we need evidence," she'd said. Real evidence. 20 minutes after Chelsea arrived, I saw a black sedan pull into the driveway. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out, expensive shoes, cold eyes. He wasn't family. He was something else entirely. I rolled down my window just enough to hear fragments of conversation on the front steps. Matthew's voice strained and desperate. "You said I had 30 days. I'm working on it. Just give me until 30 days, Fairchild." The man's voice was like gravel. "Or the consequences get more expensive." The door closed and I sat frozen in the darkness, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Beverly squeezed my arm. "Did you hear enough?" "He owes money," I whispered. "A lot of it." The next morning, Beverly and I drove to the public library. We spent hours at the reference desk, pulling property records, insurance documents, financial filings, anything public that might tell us about Matthew's situation. My hands shook as we scrolled through the databases. That's when I found it. Matthew Fairchild had taken out a new insurance policy on my life on May 15th. May 15th, exactly 30 days before Mother's Day. The policy was for $500,000. The beneficiary was Matthew himself. I read it 3 times as if the words might change. They didn't. "Oh my God," Beverly breathed, reading over my shoulder. "Pamela, he planned this. He planned all of it." The pieces fell into place like dominoes. The debt, the deadline. The insurance policy opened exactly 30 days before the poisoned earrings appeared. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a timeline. A calculated, deliberate timeline. On Friday, Beverly and I searched online for information about the earrings themselves. We combed through jewelry forums, custom metalwork suppliers, anything that might lead us to whoever had crafted them. One name kept appearing in the shadows of various craftsmanship websites, a private workshop that specialized in bespoke designs and custom mechanisms. No storefront, no public presence, just a phone number and an encrypted email address. Matthew had the means. He had the knowledge, or at least the resources, to hire someone with knowledge. And now I knew he had the motive. He needs money, I said quietly to Beverly as we sat in her car outside the library. Badly, and I'm worth $500,000 dead. Beverly reached over and gripped my hand. What are you going to do? I thought about Chelsea, about how Matthew had already poisoned her mind against me. I thought about Eileen orchestrating this from the shadows. I thought about the earrings still sitting in an evidence folder at Dr. Hayes's lab. I need more, I said. I need something they can't deny. Something that directly connects them to the earrings, to the workshop, to the poison. I paused, my voice dropping to barely a whisper. And if I have to break into their apartment to find it, I will. Beverly's eyes widened. Pamela, that's... I know, I interrupted. But they tried to kill me, and now they're lying to my daughter about it. I'm not stopping until I have proof they can't explain away. With Chelsea's spare key, which she'd given me years ago for emergencies, not knowing what I was really planning, Beverly, and I stepped into Matthew and Eileen's apartment on a Sunday evening. The building was silent. The hallway was dark. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Stay calm, Beverly whispered, though her own voice trembled. In and out. 15 minutes maximum. We didn't turn on the lights. I had a flashlight. Beverly had her phone. The apartment smelled like lilies and something else I couldn't quite place, something chemical, artificial. We moved through the living room like ghosts, careful not to disturb anything. My hands shook as I opened drawers, rifled through papers on the desk. That's when I found a receipt from a chemical supply company dated 6 weeks ago. The invoice was addressed to Eileen Fairchild. The order description read, custom metalwork compounds and protective coating agents. But I knew better. I knew exactly what those code words meant. Pamela. Beverly called from the bedroom, her voice tight. Come here. I found her kneeling beside the bed, a cardboard box in her hands. Inside, wrapped in layers of plastic, was a container of white powder. The label read, thallium sulfate hazardous material. Keep sealed. The room tilted. I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers and took photographs of everything, the container, the label, the powder inside. Evidence. Concrete, undeniable evidence. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I moved to Eileen's nightstand and found an old answering machine, the kind people still kept for landline calls. The message light was blinking. My thumb hovered over the play button. Beverly grabbed my wrist. Don't, she whispered. That's... I need to know it, I said. I pressed play. Static crackled. Then Eileen's voice filled the darkness. Matthew, it's me. Don't worry about your mother-in-law. The timeline is perfect. She'll be gone in a few months, maybe less if we're lucky. The thallium is working exactly as we planned. Once she's gone, you'll have access to everything. Her house, her accounts, all of it. We'll pay off your debts and we'll have plenty left over. She'll never see it coming. A pause. The sound of breathing. I love you, sweetheart. We're almost there. The message ended. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I was listening to my own death sentence recorded in my daughter-in-law's voice with such casual certainty, such practiced calm. This wasn't a moment of rage or desperation. This was premeditation. This was a plan executed with the precision of someone who'd thought through every detail. Beverly's hand was on my shoulder and I realized I was crying. We have to go, she said urgently. Pamela, we have to leave, now. But I pulled out my phone and called. My fingers punched in the numbers with an almost mechanical precision. When the dispatcher answered, my voice was steady in a way I didn't recognize. I need to report attempted murder, I said, and I have evidence. As Beverly and I left the apartment, locking the door behind us with trembling hands, I understood that everything had changed. There was no going back now, no way to pretend I didn't know. No way to protect Chelsea from the truth about the man she'd married. I'd walked into that apartment as a desperate mother trying to save her own life. I was walking out as a woman who'd just turned the tables on people who'd underestimated her. When Detective Stephen Pierce arrived at the police station that night, Beverly and I were already there, sitting in a windowless interview room under harsh fluorescent lights. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Pierce was a man in his late 50s with gray threading through his dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. He settled across from us with a leather notebook and listened without interrupting as I recounted everything: the nausea, the weight loss, the earrings, doctor. Penelope Hayes's analysis, the chemical receipt, the thallium sulfate hidden beneath the bed, Eileen's recorded confession of murder. Beverly squeezed my hand under the table. "This is strong evidence, Mrs. Whitmore," Pierce said quietly. "You've done thorough work, but there's something else." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were insurance documents. Matthew had opened a $500,000 life insurance policy on my life on May 15th, exactly 30 days before he gave me the poisoned earrings on June 13th. "That's premeditation," Pierce said. He calculated the timeline. Opened the insurance, waited 30 days for the policy to activate, then executed the plan with his mother. I felt the room tilt. "There's more." Pierce continued playing the recording we'd found. Eileen's voice filled the room. "She'll be gone in a few months, maybe less if we're lucky. The thallium is working exactly as we planned. Once she's gone, you'll have access to everything." Pierce paused. "Your daughter-in-law and her mother have essentially confessed to premeditated murder. Combined with everything else, we have everything we need." Beverly asked quietly, "When do you arrest them?" "Tomorrow morning," Pierce said. "Dawn raids." By Tuesday, Matthew was arrested at his office. He went pale when the detectives arrived, tried to run before they cuffed him. Eileen was arrested at the hospital where she worked, removed from the patient floor in handcuffs, while colleagues watched in silence. The charges: attempted murder, conspiracy, wire fraud, possession of toxic substances, financial exploitation of an elder. The worst part came when Beverly called Chelsea for me. I couldn't do it myself. Chelsea didn't believe it at first. I heard her voice through Beverly's phone, high and panicked. "That's insane. Matthew would never. There has to be a mistake." Then Detective Pierce called her, walking her through the evidence: the insurance policy, the chemical purchase, the recording of her mother-in-law's voice. By the time he finished, Chelsea was crying so hard she could barely breathe. "I don't understand," she kept saying. "How could I not see this?" In the interrogation room, Matthew denied everything until Pierce played the recording. His face crumpled. He tried to claim Eileen had acted alone, that he didn't know about the thallium, that the insurance was coincidence. No one believed him. Eileen barely spoke. She sat with her jaw clenched, eyes cold, refusing to confirm or deny anything. Her silence was confession enough. 3 weeks after the arrest, both were formally charged. The arraignment was scheduled for late July. As I walked out of the courthouse that Friday, photographers snapped pictures and reporters shouted questions. My private nightmare had become public spectacle. Justice, I discovered, felt nothing like I'd imagined it would. The courtroom was packed with strangers, reporters with cameras, curious onlookers, neighbors I didn't recognize. Chelsea sat behind me, her presence a small comfort. I could feel her eyes on the back of my head as I took the stand. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Calliope, walked me through everything methodically. She asked me to describe each symptom, each moment I realized something was wrong. I had to say it all out loud in front of Matthew and Eileen, in front of dozens of strangers who would judge whether I deserved justice. I didn't look at them. I couldn't. The moment I tried to meet Matthew's eyes, I felt something break inside me. Chelsea cried silently in the gallery behind me. I could hear her breathing even above the careful words of testimony. The prosecution's case was relentless. Dr. Penelope Hayes testified about the thallium sulfate, the mechanism designed into the earrings, the slow release that would have eventually killed me. Detective Pierce presented the chemical purchase records, the recordings of Eileen's voice. But the moment that shifted everything came when Pierce presented the insurance policy. May 15th, he said, holding up the document. 30 days before the Mother's Day gift. Matthew Fairchild opened a $500,000 life insurance policy on Mrs. Whitmore exactly 30 days before he and his mother attempted to poison her to death. This isn't negligence. This isn't a mistake. This is calculated, premeditated murder. The defense attorney tried to argue coincidence. He tried to suggest I'd misunderstood the earrings, that the symptoms were psychosomatic, that the recordings could be misinterpreted. But his arguments crumbled against the weight of evidence. The jury's faces grew harder with each passing hour. Matthew sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, occasionally whispering to his lawyer. He looked diminished, somehow smaller than I remembered. Eileen stared straight ahead, her expression carved from stone. On September 15th, the verdict came back. Guilty on all counts. Matthew was sentenced to 12 years, Eileen to 10. When the judge's gavel came down, I felt the reverberations in my chest, but there was no triumph in it. Only a hollow exhaustion. Chelsea waited for me outside the courthouse. Her face was blotchy from crying, her eyes red-rimmed. We stood facing each other on the marble steps while photographers snapped pictures and reporters shouted questions. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I didn't see what he was." "This wasn't your fault," I said, reaching for her hand. But even as I said it, I knew the gap between us couldn't be bridged in a single moment. She'd married a man who tried to murder me. She defended him. She doubted me. Those things didn't just disappear because a judge said he was guilty. "I don't know how to fix this," Chelsea said, her voice breaking. "Neither do I admitted. We stood there on the courthouse steps, mother and daughter, separated by betrayal and loss, trying to find our way back to each other. The cameras kept flashing. The reporters kept shouting. And I realized that winning in court and winning back my life were two completely different battles. In the weeks after the verdict, my body surprised me with its resilience. The nausea faded. My appetite returned. I gained back the weight I'd lost, as if shedding the poison had unlocked my cell's memory of how to be whole again. But the body heals faster than the heart. Dr. Harrison asked to see me privately 2 weeks after the trial. He sat across from me with guilt written across his face. "Mrs. Whitmore, I should have run more comprehensive tests. I should have considered—" "Dr. Harrison," I interrupted gently, "you're not a toxicologist. Thallium poisoning isn't something most doctors encounter. You did everything you could, and I apologize for doubting you when I was frightened." He nodded. It was a small moment of forgiveness, but it mattered. I was learning that healing meant releasing people from the weight of my suffering, even when they didn't deserve it. Chelsea called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice small. We met at our corner booth, the same one where we'd sat so many times before. But now it felt like we were meeting for the first time. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she whispered, hands wrapped around her cup. "I didn't know. How could I have married someone capable of—" Her voice broke. I took her hand. "Chelsea, you are not responsible for what your husband did. You were deceived by someone you loved. That makes you a victim just like me." But I defended him. "I doubted you." "Because he manipulated you," I said. "That was calculated. I don't blame you for that." Chelsea cried, and I let her. We talked for 2 hours, working through the hurt, the confusion, the slow understanding that love and deception can coexist. By the time we left, something had shifted. Not healed, not yet, but the fracture had stopped widening. A week later, I walked into a therapist's office for the first time. Dr. Eleanor Walsh was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and the ability to listen without judgment. "Trust is the foundation of how we experience the world," she told me. "When it's shattered, everything feels unsafe. But trust can be rebuilt. It requires patience with others and especially with yourself." Over the following weeks, I began the work of understanding what had happened. Not just the poisoning, but the deeper wound, the rupture of trust in the people closest to me. Doctor. Walsh helped me see that the violation was existential. Someone I'd considered family had looked at my life and decided it was worth less than their financial security. But slowly, incrementally, I began to rebuild. I learned to distinguish between warranted caution and paralyzing fear. I learned that love didn't require blind trust. And I learned that forgiveness wasn't about absolving the guilty. It was about refusing to let their actions define the rest of my life. Chelsea and I had coffee every week. Beverly never left my side. And I discovered that healing wasn't about returning to who I'd been before. It was about becoming someone stronger in the broken places. A month after the verdict, I began reorganizing my life, not returning to what was, but creating something new. I was sitting in the park with Chelsea on a Tuesday afternoon, autumn leaves turning gold around us. We'd fallen into a rhythm of these walks, easy silences punctuated by careful conversation. "Mom, I want to tell you something," Chelsea said, her voice trembling. "I'm pregnant." I stopped walking. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "I'm going to have a baby," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "And I want you to be part of it. I want my baby to know their grandmother." I pulled her into my arms and held her. In that moment, something shifted. This wasn't just about surviving what Matthew and Eileen had done. This was about building something good from the ruins. Over the next few weeks, I made practical decisions. I hired a lawyer to ensure Chelsea would be financially secure, regardless of Matthew's assets. I restructured my will. I downsized sold jewelry I no longer wanted. Donated clothes cleared out decades of accumulated weight. When I told Chelsea about the financial arrangements, she cried again. "Mom, you don't have to do this." "I want it," I said simply. "Your child will never go without because of what your husband tried to do." Beverly came over for tea one afternoon and we sat in my living room, now lighter, cleaner, arranged according to what I wanted. "You've changed," Beverly said, studying me. "You're stronger." "I learned something," I replied. "Strength isn't about trusting blindly. It's about the ability to love after being wounded. It's about building something new even when you've been broken." Beverly reached over and squeezed my hand. "Your grandchild is lucky." I thought about that word, grandchild. A new generation. A chance to love differently, more carefully, with eyes wide open. Not the naive trust of a grandmother who thought her family would protect her, but something deeper love, tempered by wisdom. As November approached and Chelsea entered her second trimester, I began preparing a nursery in my home. I chose soft colors and simple furniture. I didn't buy too much. I'd learned that holding on too tightly to things, to people, to certainties only set you up for devastation. But I was ready to be a grandmother, ready to pour love into this new life to teach my grandchild resilience and caution in equal measure, ready to show them that broken things could be repaired. I still saw Dr. Walsh every week. I still had moments where I couldn't sleep, where sudden sounds made my heart race. But those moments were getting shorter, less frequent. I was learning to live in the space between naivety and paranoia, and I was discovering that there was actually a beautiful way to exist there. When Chelsea went into labor on a cold November morning, I sat outside the delivery room with my heart in my throat. Beverly sat beside me, her hand never leaving my arm. Hours passed in that waiting room, hours that felt like both seconds and eternities. Then I heard it. A cry, small, fierce, furious, the sound of new life entering the world. A nurse appeared and gestured for me. I followed her into the delivery room where Chelsea lay exhausted and glowing, and in her arms was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. "Mom, meet Claire," Chelsea whispered. Claire. Clarity. Light. Exactly what we needed. I stood there, unable to move, unable to speak. This tiny human with her wrinkled face and wisp of dark hair was my granddaughter. She was the future. She was proof that something good could come from all the darkness. I cried deep, cleansing tears that had nothing to do with fear or pain or betrayal. Just love. Pure, uncomplicated love. Beverly took a photo of me holding Claire for the first time. My hands were trembling as I cradled her against my chest. I whispered to her, though I'm not sure she could hear me. "Little one, you're going to grow up surrounded by love. I'm going to teach you to be strong and careful and kind. I'm going to show you that broken hearts can heal." Chelsea watched me with tears streaming down her face. In that moment, I think she finally understood that I hadn't blamed her, that I'd never blamed her. Over the following weeks, I spent every day at Chelsea's house or bringing her to mine. We established a routine, feeding, changing, gentle walks through the neighborhood, even as winter settled in. People stopped to admire Claire, and I felt a strange pride seeing her reflected in their smiles. One afternoon in early December, I was pushing Claire's stroller through the park when Beverly caught up with us. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, just watching the baby sleep. "You've come so far," Beverly said finally. "We have..." I corrected, squeezing her arm. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." As the year wound down toward New Year's Eve, the three of us, Chelsea, Claire, and I, spent quiet evenings together. Chelsea would rock Claire while I read aloud. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. We just existed together, healing in the gentle way that only time and love can provide. I'd survived being poisoned. I'd survived betrayal. I'd survived having my trust shattered by people I loved. But this quiet contentment, this deep ache of love for my daughter and granddaughter, this felt like the real victory. But I knew the healing wasn't complete. One afternoon, Chelsea mentioned casually that she'd heard Eileen might be released early for good behavior. The words landed like a stone in my chest. Eileen. The woman who'd tried to kill me. The woman who'd spent months calculating my death. I didn't know what I'd feel when I saw her again. Anger, fear, forgiveness. I hadn't decided yet, but as I looked at Claire sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, I knew one thing for certain. I would protect this child. I would do whatever it took to keep her safe from people who saw love as weakness and family as leverage. The new year was coming, and with it, a chapter I wasn't sure I was ready to face. 1 year after it all ended, I sat on my porch watching the garden prepare for spring. 12 months since that Tuesday when everything changed. 12 months of nausea, fear, investigation, and learning to forgive. Beverly called as if she sensed I needed to hear her voice. "How are you doing?" she asked. "I'm at peace," I said, and meant it. Chelsea arrived that afternoon with Claire, now a fat, happy 3-month-old with her mother's eyes. These ordinary moments, the ones I'd almost lost, felt like miracles. We sat at my kitchen table while Claire babbled and grabbed at my hair. "I want you to have something," I told Chelsea, pulling out my mother's wooden cradle. "This held you. Now it will hold Claire. I want her to know that love in this family endures, that it can be broken and remade stronger," Chelsea cried as she ran her fingers over the worn wood. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Eileen. She'd been released early after serving only 5 years instead of 10. Her apology was vague, asking for forgiveness without acknowledging what she'd done. I didn't write back. I didn't hate her. Hatred required too much energy. But I didn't forgive her either, not the way she wanted. Forgiveness, I'd learned, didn't mean welcoming someone back. It meant refusing to let their actions define me. Matthew remained in prison. No letters, no requests for reconciliation. His silence required nothing from me. On New Year's Eve, I prepared a simple dinner. Chelsea, Beverly, and Claire came over. We wouldn't do anything elaborate. We'd eat, talk, and watch midnight arrive. As I chopped vegetables, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, the one who'd trusted blindly, who'd believed love and safety were the same thing. She was gone. In her place was someone more careful, but not less capable of love. I'd learned that trust doesn't have to be blind to be real. Love doesn't require naivety to be genuine. Strength doesn't come from never being broken, it comes from choosing to rebuild. When midnight came, I held Claire while Beverly and Chelsea linked arms around me. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the world that had tried to take away everyone who loved her. But she was here. We were all here. To survival, Beverly toasted. To family, Chelsea added. To peace, I said, looking down at my sleeping granddaughter. The old wounds would always be there. Some scars run too deep to fade completely. But they no longer defined me. They'd taught me instead. They'd shown me my own capacity for resilience, for love, for forgiveness that didn't erase what happened. I'd survived being poisoned. I'd survived betrayal. I'd survived the shattering of everything I thought I knew. But more than that, I'd learned to live after survival, to build something new, to love with eyes wide open, to trust again, not blindly, but with wisdom earned from pain. As 2026 began, I finally understood I didn't need perfect justice or complete forgiveness. I just needed this. My daughter beside me, my granddaughter in my arms, my best friend laughing, and the knowledge that I could face whatever came next. I had found peace, not because everything was resolved, but because I finally learned to live with the unresolved parts. And to you listening to this story, remember this. I made mistakes, terrible, costly mistakes. I trusted blindly when I should have questioned. I saw only the best in people when I should have kept my eyes open to their capacity for darkness. Don't be like me. Don't wait until poison settles in your veins to start paying attention. 3 times during my journey, I've had to place my faith in God. When I couldn't understand why this happened, when I felt utterly alone in that bathroom at dawn, and when I held my granddaughter for the first time. 3 times I learned that faith isn't about getting answers. It's about finding strength to continue anyway. If your story is anything like mine, I'm telling you now, trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, investigate. When someone's words don't match their actions, don't make excuses for them. When love asks you to surrender your judgment, that's not love, that's manipulation wearing a familiar face. As a grandmother, I've learned something crucial. Family drama stories aren't just about conflict, they're about the choices we make when trust breaks. I've watched too many grandma stories where older women ignore red flags because they didn't want to see the truth. This is another family drama story, but mine ended differently because I chose to see. My personal belief, love without wisdom is dangerous. Family without boundaries is toxic, and survival without growth is just existing. Here's what I know now. You cannot control what people do to you. You can only control how you respond. In grandma stories across the world, women like me are learning this lesson. In every family drama stories unfolding right now, someone is deciding whether to trust blindly or trust wisely. Make the choice I didn't make. At first, choose wisdom. If you've listened this far, I'm asking you to do something. Share your own story in the comments below. How did you overcome betrayal? What did you learn about trust the hard way? Subscribe to this channel for more intimate family drama stories and grandma stories of resilience and survival. And please share this story because someone needs to hear that they're not alone. Before you go, I want to warn you. Some of the stories we'll share contain fictional elements created for educational purposes. They're designed to teach, not just entertain. If you find certain narratives triggering, please feel empowered to step away and find content that better serves your needs. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for witnessing my journey from poisoning to peace. This is Pamela, and my story is finally complete.